They told us not to look them in the eyes. They told us not to breathe too close. They told us nothing about what the scent of one could do to your mind, to your soul, to your mission, because no one had ever come close enough to survive the experience and still talk about it. But I was trained for the impossible, and that was exactly what I walked into when we dropped on the surface of Viral Thon. It was a dead planet, they said, until her kind rose from the mists like dreams, spun in living silk and shadows shaped in light. And the moment I stepped onto the moss-soft soil, I felt something shift, not just around me, but inside, like a wall moving or a hidden door opening. And I saw her, not cloaked, not hiding, but standing in full view, tall and shimmering and breathing in the light. And I should have aimed my rifle, and I should have called her in, but instead I stared and I breathed. And that was the last time I remembered the names of my team, or even my own. I woke up inside a chamber carved from what looked like light itself, though it held me gently, as stone holds a heartbeat. And she stood nearby, not saying a word, only watching me with eyes that had no whites or pupils, only soft, radiant green, like the glow from plants that never die. And she reached for me, and I should have flinched or resisted or remembered my training, but all I could think about was that scent, a soft sweetness that filled the air around her like every forest at dawn and every garden just after rain. And when her hand touched mine, I felt the sound of her heartbeat, or maybe it was mine, or maybe I no longer knew the difference. And she tilted her head and placed her forehead against mine, and I saw flashes of things I never lived. Memories of stars being born, planets crumbling, voices that hummed like oceans, and I knew things I could not know, and forgot things I had sworn to remember. And then I said her name before I knew I had ever learned it. They tried to call me from orbit, I know that now. Faint voices lost behind the scent, like dust on wind. And I could have answered. I should have answered. I was their commanding officer. But I did not want to leave her presence. I did not want to breathe anything else. And I could not remember why I had ever held a weapon or hated a people, or even where I had come from. The data chip in my arm still blinked red, waiting for a sync that would never come. Because the man they had sent was no longer the man who had landed. I moved through her world, seeing not ruins, but life, ancient and layered, humming and alive with stories written in color and pulse. And I followed her through tunnels of living light and fields that responded to her presence by blooming into form, and she sang to them with her scent, not with sound, not with words. And I followed not as a soldier, but as something else, as something being remade piece by vanishing piece. She did not speak, yet I heard her clearly, and perhaps that is what unsettled me most at first, and then no longer at all. Because her thoughts were not thoughts. They were feelings folded into scent, impressions carried on the wind that followed her like a veil. And when she curled beside me under the roots of an ancient crystal tree, I felt as though time itself had curled around us, too, slowing, melting, until there was only now and her breath, and my heartbeat and the soft pulse of the earth, and I could no longer remember the faces of those I once loved, or the purpose of the insignia still stamped on the inside of my boot. I touched it one last time, and it felt like someone else's clothing, like something that belonged to a version of me who had vanished in the breeze that brought her scent, the one that always came before she arrived, like a herald, like a blessing. And I whispered to her without sound, and she answered with a warmth that melted even my bones. I awoke to a flash of light in the sky, and I remembered the mission only for a moment, only in a breath that turned to ash in my lungs. Because the scent returned stronger than ever, and I knew they were coming to finish what I had not done, and I knew they would not ask questions, they would not hesitate, and I felt the warship move into orbit like the old life tugging on my veins, and I found the cum unit buried under moss where I had thrown it days or maybe weeks ago, and I stared at it, and for a moment my fingers twitched to activate it to warn them or warn her or warn myself. But her hand touched mine, and her scent poured through my body like golden light in a dark ocean, and I remembered that I no longer remembered what they wanted me to destroy, and why I had ever believed I could, and I let the cum fall again. And the ship overhead passed over us and then circled, and I felt their scanners burn through the mist. But her scent clouded everything, even them. I think even them. They assumed I was dead, that I had failed or been lost or turned. And in a way, all those things were true. Because the man they had sent was no more, and the girl they feared was not a girl, but a world, an idea, a song that moved through skin and thought. And I stayed with her. And the war moved on without me, and new stars fell, and new orders came, but none of them reached me. None of them mattered. I had become part of the air, part of her, part of the scent that moved through her forests and skies. And I no longer spoke, because she spoke for me. And we danced in the way the trees moved when no one watched, and the way the rivers sang when no one needed them to. And when she looked at me, I felt as though all of me was seen, and none of me was broken, and when she breathed near, I felt new again, as though reborn in something not human, alien, but something older, something sweet, and endless, and utterly free.